Hey everyone, so this week we decided that we want to do a little bit of a woodworking FAQ video. This is also going to include some epoxy questions as well. We just get so many questions between our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram about the different ways we build our tables and that. We thought that we would put a bunch of these questions all into one video to answer them for you guys. So we have a few questions that you guys sent in to us here on YouTube. We put a little post up. We also put a post up on Instagram where you guys sent some questions in. And then I've also got a few just on my phone here that I thought of that I see a lot. So we'll be answering all of those questions and just showing you around the shop while we do it. Alright, so I have got the YouTube questions here on my phone. That's what we're going to start with. So the first question from DSR20631 is, what type of wipe-on finish do you use on your tables? Can you give a link? I'm in Australia and want to find something similar. Thanks. So we actually use Osmo. This is what we use for the first coat, the 1101. That's their extra thin. Then for the next 2 or 3 coats, depending on how much it needs, we do the Pollux. So the Pollux works really good. We sell the Osmo. It's available on our website. Another product that we've been trying is Rubio, just some tests, and we also really like the Rubio. We're pretty satisfied with the quality of product we get from that. When it comes to what products we use though, another really common question that we'll get sometimes is, what epoxy do you use? So when it comes to epoxy, for those of you who have been following us for a while, you know that we originally started with Epoxy, and then just recently we've made the switch to Chill Epoxy. We were using Chill Epoxy for about 3 to 4 months, but currently we are using Epoxy again for everyone who's been wondering. We found that the Chill didn't work in our manufacturing process 100% of the time. Just with the techniques that we were using and the way that we were using the epoxy, we actually couldn't get it to harden up quick enough. We were finding that Epoxy would take about 3 days to be ready to demold and about 7 days to be ready to work and reach its full hardness. The Chill would take about a week to be ready to come out of the mold, and then sometimes it wouldn't reach full hardness for us for about 2 months. That's just what we were finding. The next question that we have on here is from RM Yukon, and they're asking, in general, why is epoxy so expensive? It's a simple product that is easily mass produced. I wanted to start making epoxy river tables, but I don't want to have to charge $5,000 for a dining room table because of the amount of epoxy that has to be used. That's a great question. So most types of epoxy, you're right, are easier to mass produce, let's say. But most epoxies you can only pour between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. They're very toxic and they're just very hard to work with. These new kinds of epoxies, which are a lot of the times plant-based, at least Epoxy is, that's a big reason why we like it, they require much higher quality raw materials, so the initial cost is way higher, and they're much more challenging to formulate and make because the applications need to be much different. They're not just going to be pouring 1/4 inch. Some of these products you're pouring 2, 3, or 4 inches thick at a time, so it really just takes a different product, and that's where we're trying to educate people that, you know, these epoxy tables, they're not cheap. You know, a lot of people have that misconception, but epoxy is expensive to make, and the tables themselves, as you guys have probably seen here, there's a lot of effort that goes into them, so it results in an expensive piece of furniture. The next question that we have here, it's from Nate Rust. He's wondering, what are the best materials to use for your framework so the epoxy doesn't stick? So there's 2 kinds of materials that we like to use. On the bottom of our table, which you can see here, this is HDPE, which stands for high density polyethylene. Basically it's just plastic and it has a shiny surface and it's not going to allow the epoxy to stick. And then for the sides, we actually just use these borders. It's MDF. Of course you can't see the MDF, but there is MDF underneath the tape. You can kind of see it there. And then we've just coated the whole thing in tuck tape. You can see there. Tuck tape is usually only sold in Canada, so if you can't find it where you live, you're looking for sheathing tape. That is the type of tape. Tuck tape is just the brand name. So it's either HDPE or tuck tape. Lostborn24 is asking, does resin take longer to dry when it's cold? And at what temperature do you keep your shop at? Yes, it does take longer to dry when it's cold. The epoxy curing, the chemical reaction of the epoxy, it is an exothermic chemical reaction, which means it produces heat, but heat also acts as a catalyst to the chemical reaction. So the more heat you have, the quicker it will cure, and the less heat you have, the slower it will cure. So we like to keep our room At usually, honestly, about 16 or 17 degrees Celsius. So we just have this unit here, and it's really simple for us. We turn it on, set it to 16, and then when we are doing a pour, we don't put it on the energy saver because it'll turn off, so we'll just go to the cool mode, then it'll stay on, and it gets nice and cold in this room. But the reason this works especially good is because underneath those HDPE sheets on our pouring tables is aluminum. So the aluminum gets really cold, and it just helps pull all the excess heat away, preventing it from curing too quickly. Lil_Huss773 is asking, how do you calculate how much epoxy is needed for a pour? Okay, so what I want to do to show you guys this, I'm just going to use this mold that we have here. Now, obviously there's no piece of wood in it, so I will calculate it as if we were just going to be filling the mold with no piece of wood, and I'll show you how I do that just using my phone. So I'll open up the calculator, and then what I need to do here first is I need to measure the length in inches. So I'll just set my tape down. I'm going to butt it into that end, and I'll pull it out to the other side. We've got about 86.5 inches that way. Then I like to measure the width. We have 26, so I'm going to go 86.5 times 26. And then the last dimension that I need to get is my thickness. So let's say that I had a piece and I needed to be creating a 2-inch thick tabletop. Well, I would probably do my pour at about 2.1 inches so that when we plane or sand it down, it will actually finish at 2 inches. So then I'm just going to go times 2 equals. So this number here that I have right now, that is the number of cubic inches. If I divide that by 144, that will give me the board feet that are in there, but I need to have liters in order to be able to convert this for an epoxy pour. So the conversion is 2.38 to convert board feet to liters. So I just go times 2.38 equals 74.34. So it would take 74, I would probably round that up to 75 liters to fill this 2.1 inches high. Completely with epoxy. So that basically works if we're doing slabs or if it's just solid epoxy. We calculate it in cubic inches, divide by 144 to get our board feet, and then times by 2.38 to get the number of liters. So the next question from Jimmy, Kawatra, wondering, if I am doing 2 pours of 1 inch, how long should I wait before doing a second on top first? So this is a layered table here. You can't really see it too obviously, but there's solid black here, and there's actually transparent gray on the other side. Haley will probably put it up on the screen right now so you guys can see it better. But when we use Epoxy to do this, we pour the first layer, we wait 36 hours, then we pour the second layer. We got another question here from Lostborn24, wondering 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 part resin. What's the difference? So what he is referring to there is the ratio at which we're mixing the resin and hardener. So 1-to-1 is obviously equal parts of both, and then 2-to-1 is 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. Now this piece here, this is 1-to-1. So what I want you to notice is how soft it is. You can see that I'm actually able to dent this with my finger. See that there? Dents really, really easily. So that is the 1-to-1 epoxy. Now, when you use less hardener and more resin, here's the result. You notice I cannot really dent this as easily as I can. It won't squish in the same way. You can hear that's hard. They sound the same, of course, when I do that, but this is much harder. Like this whole top lip is sharp, where this isn't at all. So it sounds kind of counterintuitive because you would assume by using less hardener it would be softer, but the way it was explained to me by the manufacturer is that the strength in this mixture actually comes from the resin. The hardener is only there to provide a catalyst to start the chemical reaction. It doesn't give any strength. So the more resin, the more strength you get. I've got 2 questions here that are kind of somewhat related to each other, so I'm going to answer them together. First one's from Bonjel, probably saying that completely wrong. They're wondering how much for a side table. And the next question I want to answer with it is Seji.in. They're wondering, do you ship to India? So The question, how much for a side table? Well, everything is completely custom, so the best thing for you to do would send in a request for us and we can get you a quote on that based on the dimensions and wood species that you're looking for. And yes, we do ship to India. We can ship worldwide. The best way for anyone who is interested in a quote is to actually fill out our quote form. So we'll put a link here on screen or in the description. You basically fill out all the specs of your table and what you're looking for. You tell us the size, the wood species, the leg style, if you want resin or not, and then we get back to you with an estimate and show you potential slabs. So these next questions that I have here, these are ones that I came up with. Me and Haley kind of thought of what are the most common questions we get, so we put these questions together. One question we get all of the time is, will the epoxy ever separate away from the wood? So the answer is no, if you follow the proper procedures. Now let me explain to you what those proper procedures are. So if we look at this piece here, this is a coffee table we did, and there's absolutely no signs of separation. Everything's completely flush and still seamless on the end here. Now, one common thing that I see a lot of people actually recommending on social media when it comes to these tables is they recommend you seal the live edge of your piece to avoid bubbles, which, does it work? Yes, it does work. You will get less bubbles, but you're actually compromising the strength of your bond, because what you're doing is you're sealing off the pores of the wood and you no longer allow the epoxy in your main pour to penetrate into the pores of the wood. When you seal the edge, you just get a plastic on plastic bond. As opposed to an unsealed edge, you have basically a little, like millions of little fingers of epoxy soaking into all those pores of the wood. So you guys have seen what an unsealed edge looks like. Let me show you what a sealed edge looks like. We'll actually come around to this end of the table here. This is when we sealed the edge on. And here, Joe, let's pull the table a bit that way. And if you check this out, we've started to get separation here. So this was one of our early test pieces we did once we first started hearing people recommend this technique. We tried it out and it only took about 6 months to separate. So if you are in the market for one of these tables, or if you are yourself making one of these tables, don't buy a table that has a sealed live edge, and also I would not recommend sealing the live edge yourself. It's just not gonna work as good. Okay. Another thing I wanted to talk about, because I think it's just really good common knowledge anyone should have when they're doing woodworking, is what to actually look for in a piece of wood when you go to make a selection for a project. So the most probably important factors that we look for in a piece of wood is how straight it is. That always usually comes first, even over the aesthetics of the piece of wood, because if your lumber's not straight, it doesn't matter how good it looks, you're gonna struggle to build something with it anyway. So there is kind of 3 ways that wood works. It can cup, which means across the width. So this, like going across this way. So if this board, if we are to actually lay this down flat, we'll see how much of a cup this one has. First thing you want to check for is the cup. Now, you can see that we're almost touching on the middle and we're more lifted on the ends. So that means that this piece of wood is actually kind of cupped like this. So that is the first thing you're going to want to look for. You want to check across the width of the grain and see how cupped it is. The next thing is the crook. Now this is less obvious on live edge slabs. It's more obvious on straight edge lumber. But that refers to across the length of the grain, is how straight is it. So the crook, if this board had a crook, it might be shaped like this. I'll actually show you guys over here on a piece of lumber. If I set it down, you can see we are touching on either end, but there's actually a gap in the middle. So that means that it is not straight and it's crooked or crooked. So this board essentially has a shape like that. Now, the final thing that you need to check for on a piece of wood is the bow across the length. So again, this board is actually a good example. It kind of has a shape like this to it. I don't know if you guys can see that. It has a slight arch to it, and when I put it down on the ground, that's another good way to check, because in the middle, you can see it's raised. I'm touching on the ends, and it's raised up in the middle, so that means the board is bowed. So again, you want to check the cup across the width, the crook across the length, and also the bow across the length. Those 3 things should come first. Then you start worrying about the aesthetics of a piece of wood. So if we head back over to some of these live edge slabs, what I would look for right away is cracks and knots. Now, a lot of these slabs here, you can see like this has a large crack going all the way down, and there's also some large inclusions in the bottom. So anything that has that, you almost need to account on the fact that it's gonna have to be repaired. So if this is a project, let's say you're doing for a client, make sure you budget that in. Any cracks, you're gonna have to buy epoxy and you're gonna have to spend time to film them. So that's gonna make a difference to whether you can actually use it or not. The final thing, or maybe not the final thing, there's lots of little things that go into it, but I would say that the next big thing that we need to check for and make sure of is how dry the material is. So we use a simple moisture meter. We like the ones from Wagner. You guys should check them out. They're sort of like the gold standard when it comes to moisture meters. And you want your wood to be below 10% if you're going to work with it. Any hardwood, you don't want to use it if it's above 10%. You run the risk of it warping and having failed joinery throughout the life of the project. So those are kind of the main things that we look for when we're picking a piece of wood. Well, there you go, everyone. That is our woodworking and epoxy FAQ video. We wanted to put this together again just so you guys could have a good reference, so that if you ever had any questions you wanted answered, you can come back and check out this video just so we can help you guys out. If there's any other questions that we didn't answer in this video, we tried our best to answer everything we could, but if we for some reason missed yours, just leave a comment below. We'll do our best to answer it. You can also always send us a DM on Instagram as well. But I really want to thank you guys for watching. If you could drop a thumbs up on this video if you learned something this time, we would really appreciate that because it helps our channel grow. And like I said, it just gives us more time to do videos like this for you. But we'll see you guys next Friday.